Meanwhile, in New Hampshire, during a campaign stop, Republican presidential candidate, former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, was asked this question by an audience member. Quote, "What was the cause of the Civil War?" This is how Governor Haley responded.
What was the cause of the United States Civil War?
Well, don't come with an easy question or anything. I mean, I think the cause of the Civil War was basically how government was going to run, the freedoms and what people could and couldn't do. What do you think the cause of the Civil War was? I'm sorry?
I'm not running for president. I wanted to see your
That's a good thing.
On the cause of the Civil War.
I mean, I think it always comes down to the role of government and what the rights of the people are. And I will always stand by the fact that I think government was intended to secure the rights and freedoms of the people. It was never meant to be all things to all people. Government doesn't need to tell you how to live your life. They don't need to tell you what you can and can't do. They don't need to be a part of your life. They need to make sure that you have freedom. We need to have capitalism. We need to have economic freedom. We need to make sure that we do all things so that individuals have the liberties so that they can have freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to do or be anything they want to be without government getting in the way.
Thank you. And in the year 2023, it's astonishing to me that you answer that question without mentioning the word slavery.
What do you want me to say about slavery?
No, you answered my question. Thank you.
Next question.
So, Eugene, we can pick through that a million different ways. Perhaps the follow-up question where she says, "What do you want me to say about slavery?" Is what stuck with most people as they watch that. A commentary on Governor Haley, perhaps, but also about the state of the Republican Party. And as you watch the gears turning there, what she should and should not say in order to keep her support.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And if you watch the crowd as things were going downhill, you could start to see people kind of get a little squeamish as she was answering those questions. You know, my family's always been from South Carolina, so I am very, very well versed on the conversation that happens. I was just there earlier this week for Christmas. I'm very well versed in the conversation that happens versus, you know, whether it was states' rights or slavery. What was the real conversation? So she's showing that, right? That she's a product of that conversation. This is also something in line with what she said before when asked when running for governor in 2010 about slavery. Or about the cause of the Civil War. Obviously, it was about slavery. If it was about states' rights, it was the state's ability to hold slaves. If it was about freedoms and what the government could tell you what to do, it was whether or not the government could tell you whether or not you can own and beat people, rape and kill them because they were your property, right? That is clear to everyone who has eyes and has read history books. But what she is showing is the fact that in the Republican Party right now, there is not a lot of room for folks who would say something like that, who would be honest about slavery as the cause and the main cause of the Civil War. You know, you think about the last few years and what the Republican Party has focused on, the conversation about race in this country, their attacking of critical race theory. So there's almost no other answer that she could give in this Republican primary that wouldn't, you know, take some votes away from her as she is moving forward. I will say I got some texts from some of the staffers on the other campaigns of this exact message when it happened. But then when I asked them how their candidate would answer, they got a little pissed off at me and said, "You would never ask them that question." And so it tells you that while they want this to knock her, they don't want to answer the question either.
Jen, this shouldn't have been hard. Slavery is the answer here. But to Eugene's point, it is reflective of where the Republican base is right now, that you can't tell a simple truth for fear of losing voters in what has become such a radicalized Republican Party. But let's take a step back and put this in the context of this primary season. I mean, we didn't quite have a Ron DeSantis welcome to the resistance moment there, but at least he's telling the truth about what Trump is going to do very late to the party.
You feel like DeSantis is actually saying now what he has always thought, but not had the courage
because
to say.
his campaign appears to be in its death throes.
Yeah.
He's got nothing left to lose, I suppose. But I wonder if this is going to this moment here, last night, Haley and the Civil War, which is really exploding on social media. We had the Biden campaign weigh in and already also making clear it was about slavery.
Yeah.
if this could blunt some of her momentum. Because
I mean,
it does seem like she has some, at least
Yeah.
Iowa's always been hard for her, but it seems like going to New Hampshire, she did have the wind at her back. Maybe this cost her.
It's breathtaking. I mean, I had read the transcript, but I had not actually seen it. And it is just breathtaking when she says, what do you want me to say about slavery? I mean, that is her campaign in one question, right? It is like, who do you want me to be right now who do I need to morph into in order to never take Trump on, but be acceptable enough to sort of the MAGA majority that should something happen outside of my control, because she's not doing anything to actually beat Trump, I could be the person that inherits everyone else's votes. And this could be, so, this is in New Hampshire, right? That New Hampshire voters, they want you to be courageous. They like independent thinkers. They want you to speak frankly. This could, so I think that it could hurt her. And, if DeSantis's operation is effective, they should be doing more to lift it up and make it a thing. But it also could have been a really big moment for her because she came on the national scene by being the Republican governor who took down or was part of taking down the Confederate flag over the South Carolina state legislature after the terrible race-based shooting in Charleston at the AME church there in 2015. And that is when we, first learned of Nikki Haley. This could have been a great moment for her to say, like, I come from the South. This is what we've learned. And instead, it is this panic. What do you want me to say about slavery?
Yeah, it's that last line. What do you want me to say about slavery? Almost sort of defiant that she was going to refuse to say something there. So